Literally the first piece that I went to install and I just broke it.
You know what's missing from this back wall? Some 3D prints. So I want to 3D print a way to display some of the projects that I've previously 3D printed using 3D printing. That's a lot of 3D printing, but I really need a shelving unit to be able to properly do that. And it just so happens that I might have found the perfect set of modular 3D printable files to actually make this happen. And it's called Shelfinity, and it's created by KobaRiley, and it's a completely modular set of 3D printable files that should allow me to make a really cool modular set of 3D printable shelves that go around this skull and create some kind of a looping pattern. I don't quite know what I'm gonna do with it yet, but let's get some of these parts 3D printed. And to do that, I'm gonna be printing these over on my Elegoo Neptune 3D printers. And if you didn't already guess, Elegoo is the sponsor of today's video. I'm gonna be using their Elegoo Neptune 4 Pro 3D printer for these smaller straight pieces, and I'm gonna be using the Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus for the larger curved pieces, which fit perfectly here on this larger bed. To add a little bit more durability to these prints, it's gonna be a shelving unit. I'm also using Elegoo's Pet G. This is their beige Pet G, and it prints so cleanly on these 3D printers. Also, if you're interested in winning some of Elegoo's resin 3D printers, make sure to check out their partnership with Meshy AI. They're running a contest through December 18th, where you can get a chance to win one of their 3D printers. And if you're interested in more information about any of Elegoo's products, you'll find links to those down below. Now, if you're gonna attempt this project for yourself, I do have some tips and recommendations that I'm gonna have for you on this. Obviously, printing with Pet G is gonna add a little bit more durability to the prints since we are gonna be wall mounting these. I don't want them to fall apart or break or warp with any heat in the summer or anything like that. So this should add a little bit more rigidity and durability to that. The other thing is I also ended up using brims for all of the prints here just to help with the adhesion to the build plate surface because I didn't want any of the edges lifting off of the build plate. And one interesting issue that I ran into while printing these is you'll notice here where some of the prints started splitting while I was printing this here. And I found out the reason why this was happening is because I didn't have my temperature set high enough here for the Pet G, and it was ending up just splitting as it was printing. It was just too cool of a temperature. So I upped that by 10 degrees. I bumped it up to, I think, 245 from 235, and that solved this issue. So here's something that I think is really cool about these files. You'll see here, these are the two end caps that you're gonna end up printing, and there's a bit of a bevel on the connection joints here. That allows these two to really snap together and create a really snug, solid fit where they're not gonna be able to easily pull apart, or they shouldn't pull apart at all, and only allow you to slide them on and off. And then on one end has the threaded opening there to allow you to screw these into the actual wall. And to do that, I'm gonna be using a bunch of wall anchors where I can't find studs. So after a bunch of printing, I think I ended up going through 4 rolls of Elegoo's Pet G, and this was about 20% infill for each of these prints, as well as 3 walls to add a little bit more durability to each of the prints there. And here's a better look at all of the parts that I've printed here. I printed 4 of each of the curved files there. So this should allow me to do some pretty unique shapes here, like an S shape or a full curve. And then I printed 13 of the straight printed parts here. I still need to remove the brim from a lot of these prints as well. But that should hopefully give me some fairly good options when it comes to designing this out. And I'm not entirely sure exactly how this is gonna work, other than I know I want it to kind of curve up and around the skull. And if you don't already own one, a deburring tool is an absolutely amazing addition to your 3D printing tool set that's gonna allow you to really easily clean up any excess 3D printed marks or elephant's feet from your prints. Now, before I even get started with installing these onto the wall, I quickly snapped together a few pieces of the shelving unit just to see how I could get started with this and to make sure that it would be wrapping around the skull. And I'm really glad I did that because there's a very specific order that these need to go in, and I'm gonna have to start on the opposite side of the wall here in order for these to be able to screw in and then slot in the next piece of the shelf. And what I mean by that is, here is one of the pieces of the shelf here, and you'll see that there's one point here where we can anchor this to the wall. Now, that's potentially gonna be a starting point for us, and then with the next block, I can come in here
and then slide this one into the opening, lock it into place, and then screw in this side. The problem coming in place is if you don't start in the correct order, there's gonna be no way for you to come in from behind and slide in your pieces. Just make sure you consider that before you start screwing these directly into the wall. Now, this wasn't intentional, but it just so happens that the starting point for my shelves are gonna be where there's a stud in the wall. I just broke the piece. Literally, the first piece that I went to install and I just broke it. Now for the next part, I wanna install some of those flat straight pieces, but I figured since this was Shelfinity and it kind of sounds like Gridfinity, why not create a Gridfinity version of this flat plate? And now I can install these here directly onto the shelf. And honestly, I have no idea what I'm gonna use these for, but I figured it'd be kind of fun since it sounds similar. Why not have those as an option? And it's a 2x4 plate option. Also, if you find that your connection points are a little too snug and hard to slide into place, you can very lightly, and I mean very lightly, sand or Dremel the edges of those, and it should allow those to more easily slide in and out of place. Here's the final piece, which is the easiest to install, that just slots right into place. And I finished getting all of the shelving installed. I'm honestly pretty happy with how this all turned out. It was fairly time consuming getting everything drilled and all the screws installed, but it went together pretty seamlessly. And now the part that I'm most excited for is getting it decorated. And while I'm doing that, I want to say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support. If you're interested in things like the 3D printer settings that I use for my 3D printers, you can find those over in my Patreon. And if you haven't already heard, I'm doing a fundraiser from now until the end of the year, helping raise money for my son's middle school for any families that can't afford to send their kids on the upcoming Washington, D.C. trip this spring. I'll also be matching any donations that I receive. Now, as you can see, I don't exactly have anything too heavy sitting on those shelves. It's not exactly the most sturdy when it comes to being able to put heavy things on there, but for being able to display some of my smaller projects, it should work out perfectly for my needs. If you're interested in 3D printing one of these Shelfinities for yourself, I'll have the links to those down below. And let me know what you think I should do with the Gridfinity shelf option. I'm thinking about maybe designing a planter or something like that and having a hanging plant here on the shelf. But hey, thanks so much for watching, you all, and I'll see you next time. Honestly, pretty happy with how this project turned out. It looks fantastic up here on the wall. Was a little nervous at the get-go when that first print broke when I was trying to install it.